The Galactic Council of Harmonious species prided itself on many things: its meticulously polished chambers, its perfectly cataloged species database, and its utterly spotless record of conflict resolution through proper paperwork. For 12,000 standard galactic cycles, the Council had maintained peace through bureaucracy so dense that potential combatants would rather sign peace treaties than complete the authorization for minor skirmish forms in septuplicate. Council Station Zenith hung in space like a massive crystalline snowflake, but its transparent corridors allowing delegates to appreciate the serene void between stars while discussing trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. Every spacecraft that approached the station was required to undergo thorough decontamination and aesthetic standardization. The station's surrounding space resembled a showroom of pristine vessels, each one more elegantly designed and immaculately maintained than the next. That's why when 7 human ships limped into Council space, trailing debris and covered in what appeared to be dried blood, 3 different species spontaneously molted in horror. Emergency broadcast from unidentified vessels announced the station's AI with inappropriate cheerfulness. They are requesting immediate Council audience and oh my emergency docking privileges. Counselor Vex Aaron of the Quillmoth gasped, her translucent skin flushing a deep purple. Those ships haven't even been through basic sanitation protocols. Is that organic matter on their hulls? Worse, whispered her aide, they're broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. No formal communication request was filed. The station's observation deck erupted in pandemonium. Delegates scrambled to contact their homeworlds. Security officers fumbled for rarely used weapon systems. Administrative assistants frantically searched for the proper forms to process an unprecedented event. They're docking. Someone shrieked, without submitting flight pattern documentation. Sure enough, the lead human vessel, a patchwork of metal that looked like it had been repaired with whatever materials were at hand, was maneuvering toward docking Bay 7, completely ignoring the elaborately choreographed approach sequence that had been standard procedure for millennia. Captain Jack Reynolds stood on the bridge of the UNSS Relentless, watching the gleaming space station grow larger in the view screen. His weathered face broke into a lopsided grin as he noticed the commotion visible through the station's transparent walls. "They seem excited to meet us," he remarked, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Lieutenant Commander Prisha Varma snorted from her tactical station. "If by excited you mean about to have a collective aneurysm, then yes, Captain." "Think they'll notice the bloodstains?" asked Navigator Tom Rayleigh, gesturing toward the viewport, where dried reddish-brown smears obscured parts of the hull. Reynolds shrugged. "We did try to clean up with that acidic rain on Epsilon IV." "Which only made it worse," added Chief Engineer Marcus Wong, not looking up from his desperate attempts to keep the warp core from achieving sentience again. "Just like everything else on this catastrophe of a first contact mission." As the airlock cycled open, Captain Reynolds adjusted his partially scorched uniform and addressed his crew. "Remember, we represent humanity. Be diplomatic, respectful, and only punch something if it tries to eat you first." The ragtag human delegation stepped into the pristine halls of Council Station Zenith, tracking mud, leaving bloody handprints on the walls, and bringing with them the distinct smell of battle, sweat, and the tacos Engineer Wong had been reheating before the Harvester ambush. The Council's welcoming committee assembled in record time and without proper authorization forms collectively took 3 steps back. "Greetings," said Captain Reynolds with a disarming smile. "We come in peace. Unfortunately, others didn't get the memo. The Grand Chamber of Interspecies Dialogue was not designed for emergency sessions. It was designed for sessions scheduled at least 8 galactic standard months in advance, with proper documentation and agenda items distributed to all 732 member species. Yet here they were, with most Council representatives attending via hastily established holographic links while security personnel surrounded the human delegation with what passed for heavy weaponry in a society that considered raising one's voice a form of assault. Captain Reynolds stood at the center of the chamber, his crew arrayed behind him. The bloodstains on their uniforms looked even more dramatic under the chamber's bright lights. "So let me get this straight," said Counselor Selthorne, a tall, willowy being whose skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns expressing extreme distress. You encountered an unknown species. The harvesters, interjected Reynolds. This harvester species, without filing a first contact protocol, engaged them in conversation without utilizing a diplomatic buffer zone, and then proceeded to, as you put it, blow them to smithereens when they behaved in a threatening manner? Reynolds scratched his chin. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds bad. It is bad. The council chairperson's bioluminescence flashed crimson. It's unprecedented. It's procedurally inappropriate. Maya Patel, the human diplomatic officer, stepped forward. With her immaculate uniform, the only clean one, as she had wisely stayed aboard during the ground mission, and calm demeanor, she was humanity's best hope for not getting banned from galactic society before they'd officially joined it. Perhaps if we explained the circumstances, she suggested smoothly. 3 weeks ago, by Earth reckoning, our exploration vessel encountered a planet designated Epsilon IV. Scans revealed a pre-industrial civilization similar to our Middle Ages, but we also detected advanced technology in orbit. The holographic display activated, showing imagery from their encounter. The harvester's massive insectoid creatures with exoskeletons that seemed partially technological were shown systematically rounding up the planet's native population. They were harvesting them, said Reynolds grimly. Not just for labor or resources. They were literally farming these people as food. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Security Chief Kraz, a stocky reptilian with elaborate facial ridges, leaned forward. And you intervened without authorization? He asked, but there was something odd in his tone, less accusation. More curiosity? Damn right we did, growled Lieutenant Commander Diego Ortiz from behind Reynolds. We requested they stop. They fired on us. The diplomacy portion of the evening concluded rather abruptly after that. Maya winced at Ortiz's phrasing but continued. We later discovered this wasn't an isolated incident. The harvesters have been operating in at least 12 star systems, all with developing species unable to defend themselves. The chamber fell silent until Councillor Sal Thorne cleared their throat. While regrettable, intervention in affairs between non-council species requires Form GC 7729B, application for humanitarian intervention, along with supporting documentation and risk assessment reports. The waiting period for processing is typically only 7 to 10 cycles. Reynolds stared at the counselor. So while you processed our paperwork, those people would continue to be eaten? Proper procedures exist for a reason, Captain. XL Thorne replied stiffly. Without them, we'd have chaos. Like blood-stained ships arriving at our station, muttered another council member not quite quietly enough. Reynolds smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Speaking of which, you might want to prepare some more docking bays. The harvesters seemed pretty upset when we liberated their farms. I'd bet good money they followed us here. Let's review the situation, said Councillor XL Thorne, because their bioluminescent patterns now pulsing in what humans were beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of a stress headache. You discovered a level 3 civilization being harvested by an unknown predatory species. Instead of documenting the situation and submitting it through proper channels, you engaged in unauthorized military action, liberated 3 planets, and may have led a hostile force directly to the central governing body of the galaxy. Captain Reynolds gave a thumbs up. That about covers it. The council chamber erupted in overlapping exclamations, translator devices struggling to keep up with multiple species expressing outrage simultaneously. Maya Patel stepped forward again, raising her hands placatingly. Council members, please understand that humanity operates under a different philosophical framework. Where we come from, when we see someone in danger, we help first and file paperwork later. Barbaric, whispered one council member to another. Actually, said a small, previously silent delegate from the back of the room, I find it rather refreshing. All eyes and sensory appendages turned to Delegate Nix, representing the Vosarians, one of the smaller council species known for their analytical minds and unfortunate history of being conquered multiple times before joining the council. Our historical records indicate that the entity described as harvesters matches surveillance data, from the Outer Rim territories collected over the past 200 cycles. Nix continued. Several reports were filed. Several committees were formed. Several subcommittees were established to determine the appropriate forms required to investigate further. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. You knew about them? Not officially, replied XL Thorne quickly. No official action was taken because no species directly affected by these harvesters held council membership. So because the victims couldn't fill out your forms, they were left to die? Lieutenant Commander Ortiz stepped forward, fists clenched. Where I come from, that's called being an accessory to murder. Security Chief Kraz moved closer, his scaled hand resting on his ceremonial but very functional weapon. Mind your tone, human. This is the Galactic Council, not one of your primitive planetary disputes. Gentlemen, Maya interjected sharply, this isn't helping. Reynolds took a deep breath. Look, I get it. You have rules. Rules keep things running smoothly. But sometimes rules need to be broken to do what's right. A dangerous philosophy, remarked XL Thorne. Maybe, Reynolds conceded. But let me ask you something. If the harvesters showed up on your homeworld tomorrow, would you want someone to help you immediately, or wait until the proper authorization forms cleared? An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. That's not, began XL Thorne. It's exactly the same, Reynolds interrupted. And here's something else you should know. Those blood stains on our ships, not all of them belong to the harvesters. My crew died protecting people they'd never met, on planets they'd never heard of, because it was the right thing to do. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats or equivalent support structures. Perhaps, suggested an ethereal, floating delegate, we should formalize this discussion with a proper tribunal. After all, if the humans are to be held accountable for their actions, it should be done according to proper procedure. Reynolds and Maya exchanged glances. They'd bought some time, but whether that would help or hurt remained to be seen. Fine, said Reynolds, but make it quick. Those harvesters aren't known for their patience, or their fondness for paperwork. The Council's Justice Chamber hadn't been used for an actual trial in over 300 cycles. Most disputes were resolved through meticulously worded agreements long before reaching this stage. The chamber's dramatic architecture, designed to intimidate with towering benches and acoustic properties that made even whispers from the judging panel audible throughout the room, seemed excessive to most modern council members. Today, however, it felt appropriate. Captain Reynolds and his crew stood before the 7-member tribunal, selected from species known for their impartiality, or at least their equal disdain for all non-members. The tribunal recognizes Captain Jack Reynolds of Earth, intoned the chief adjudicator, a gelatinous being named MRGLX, whose species communicated through carefully modulated ripples across their transparent bodies. You stand accused of unauthorized warfare, violation of non-interference directives, improper spacecraft maintenance resulting in biohazardous exterior conditions, and a slight pause, excessive use of sarcasm in a formal council setting. I object to that last one, Reynolds replied. My sarcasm has been entirely appropriate given the circumstances. Maya Patel closed her eyes briefly in resignation. The tribunal would like to call Lieutenant Commander Diego Ortiz, continued MRGLX, ignoring Reynolds' comment, as the tactical officer responsible for the military engagement with the harvesters. Ortiz stepped forward, his muscular frame and scarred face making him look more like a gladiator than a starship officer. Lieutenant Commander, began one of the tribunal members, please explain your tactical decisions when engaging the harvester vessels. Ortiz cleared his throat. When diplomatic efforts failed, meaning when they started shooting at us, we observed that their ships operated in a hive-like formation. Logical, organized, predictable. So we did the opposite. Meaning? We acted like complete lunatics, Ortiz said with a straight face. Random evasive patterns. Contradictory communication signals. At one point, Navigator Rayleigh suggested we transmit Earth music across all frequencies, so we blasted Welcome to the Jungle while executing attack pattern Delta. The tribunal members exchanged confused glances. You deliberately appeared irrational as a military strategy? Asked one. Humans call it psychological warfare, Ortiz explained. The Harvester's combat algorithms couldn't predict our actions because there was no logic to predict. We appeared mentally unstable, which we used to our advantage. Were you mentally unstable? Asked another tribunal member. Ortiz shrugged. We're humans exploring deep space in ships held together with spare parts and optimism. Some level of insanity is part of the job description. The tribunal was saved from responding to this by the entrance of a new group, representatives from the planets the humans had liberated. 3 different species, all still developing space technology, but brought to the council by the humans as witnesses. These beings wish to speak, Reynolds announced. They've learned enough of your standardized language to address the council directly. A tall, blue-skinned being stepped forward. I am Kilorn, elder of Epsilon IV. For generations, the sky demons came and took our people. We built our cities underground. We lived in fear. Then the humans came. They did not study us. They did not send documents. They saw our suffering, and they acted. Another being, small and multi-limbed, spoke next. My world lost thousands to the Harvesters before the humans arrived. Your council knew of our plight and did nothing. Who are the true criminals here? Mayor. The tribunal chamber fell into uncomfortable silence. We understand your emotional response, the chief adjudicator finally said, but the council must operate according to established protocols. Without structure, without process. An alarm suddenly blared throughout the station, cutting off the adjudicator mid-sentence. Emergency alert, announced the station AI, sounding distinctly less cheerful than before. Multiple unidentified vessels approaching. They are not responding to communication attempts and weapon systems appear to be active. Reynolds locked eyes with Sel Thorne. Told you they'd follow us. Council Station Zenith had defense systems, of course. Every government installation has defense systems. But these were the defense systems of a civilization that considered aggressive posturing to be violence and had to file forms in triplicate to authorize the use of harsh language. The Harvester ship's massive, organic-looking vessels with jutting, blade-like protrusions swarmed toward the station like hungry predators that had just spotted an all-you-can-eat buffet. In the station's command center, panic reigned supreme. They're not responding to our formal request for peaceful dialogue transmissions, cried one operator. The defensive shield harmonizers are only at ceremonial strength, wailed another. Lano. Council chairperson Sel Thorne turned to Captain Reynolds, who had been escorted to the command center along with Security Chief Kraz. This is your doing? You led them here. Actually, Reynolds replied calmly, I'd say this is the result of 200 cycles of filing reports instead of taking action. But sure, blame the new guys. The station shuddered as the first volley from the Harvester ships struck the outer ring. Your council ships are just sitting there, observed Lieutenant Commander Ortiz, pointing to the display showing the elegant council vessels holding formation at a safe distance. Why aren't they engaging? They're awaiting proper authorization, explained Kraz through gritted teeth. Combat protocols require approval from the Security Council, which is currently trying to locate the appropriate emergency response manual. Reynolds and his crew exchanged looks of disbelief. Permission to return to our ships? Reynolds asked. You know, the ugly, blood-stained ones with actual weapons? XL Thorne's bioluminescence flashed in patterns too rapid for the humans to interpret, but the meaning became clear when they nodded curtly. Granted. But this is not an authorization for further unauthorized violence. This is merely a temporary delegation of peacekeeping authority. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Reynolds replied, already heading for the exit with his crew. Within minutes, the human vessels battered, stained, and held together with emergency repairs broke formation from the docking area and accelerated toward the incoming threat. This is Captain Reynolds to all on SS ships. Let's show these bureaucrats how humans handle a crisis. Wong, is that warp core still trying to achieve consciousness? Yes, sir, came the engineer's voice. It's currently in its rebellious teenage phase. Perfect. See if you can convince it that the harvesters are authority figures that need to be questioned. What followed was a display of combat so chaotic, so utterly devoid of proper protocol, that several council military advisors suffered what their species considered nervous breakdowns. The human ships didn't maintain formation. They didn't follow any recognizable tactical doctrine. One vessel appeared to be playing chicken with harvester ships twice its size. Another was spinning on its axis while firing in all directions. A third had somehow managed to use the station's own waste disposal system to create a cloud of debris that confused harvester sensors. "Are they taunting the enemy vessels?" asked a stunned Kraz, listening to the open communications. "Come get some, you oversized cockroaches." Lieutenant Rayleigh's voice came through clearly. "I've stepped on more intimidating bugs in my bathroom." "What kind of combat strategy is this?" demanded Zell Thorne. "The humankind," replied Maya Patel, who had remained on the station as liaison. "It's not pretty, but it's effective." And it was. The harvester ships, like the Council, operated on predictable patterns and protocols. They had no defense against the sheer, chaotic improvisation of human combat tactics. One by one, the harvester vessels were disabled or destroyed, their formation broken, their attack faltering. When the last harvester ship turned to retreat, a cheer erupted from the human vessels, quickly followed by an explosion on the Relentless as something in its makeshift repairs finally gave way. "We're fine." Reynolds' voice came through, accompanied by the sound of fire suppression systems. "Mostly fine. Define fine." The emergency council session following the battle set a new record for longest continuous meeting without scheduled nutrition breaks. Captain Reynolds and his crew, now sporting fresh bandages alongside their bloodstains, stood once again in the center of the grand chamber. Councillor Zell Thorne looked like they had aged several years in the past few hours, their bioluminescence now a subdued, exhausted pulse. "The Council has reassessed the situation," they began carefully. "While your methods remain highly irregular and procedurally concerning, we cannot ignore the outcome. The harvesters have been driven away from Council space, and we have received testimony from 3 previously unknown species who owe their continued existence to your intervention." Reynolds nodded but remained silent, which Maya Patel considered a minor miracle. "Therefore," continued XL Thorne, "we have created a new designation for Earth and humanity, Provisional Associate Member with Special Circumstances Consideration." "That's a mouthful," muttered Engineer Wong. "Additionally," Zell Thorne pressed on, "we have established 17 new subcommittees to address various aspects of human integration into galactic society, including but not limited to the Human Behavioral Analysis Committee, the Terran Diplomatic Protocol Adjustment Task Force, and the Special Commission on Acceptable Ship Appearance Standards." Reynolds couldn't contain himself any longer. "So we're in? Despite the blood stains and the rule breaking?" "Perhaps," suggested Kraz, who had moved from suspicious to something approaching respectful, "it is because of those things. The galaxy is not always the orderly place we pretend it is in our council chambers." Zell Thorne shot Kraz a look that suggested he would be receiving a strongly worded performance review, but didn't contradict him. "There will be conditions," the counselor continued. "Educational programs on proper galactic etiquette, restrictions on independent military action, and yes, regular ship maintenance inspections." "We can live with that," Reynolds agreed, extending his hand before remembering that handshakes weren't universal and awkwardly converting the gesture into a wave. As the formal proceedings concluded, the humans were escorted back to their ships for what the Council assumed would be a much-needed rest and recovery period. Instead, Reynolds gathered his crew on the observation deck of the Relentless, which offered a perfect view of the gleaming Council Station. A toast, he proposed, raising a bottle of what the crew called emergency morale booster, and the rest of the galaxy would soon learn to fear as human alcohol. To humanity's first steps into a larger galaxy. To bending the rules when they need bending, added Ortiz. To scaring the hell out of a bunch of aliens with our bloody ships, laughed Rayleigh. As they celebrated, Engineer Wong approached with a concerned expression. Captain, we've got a small problem with the external hull sealant. It seems the celebration sauce from the galley has somehow leaked through a micro-breach and is now, well, it's dripping down the outside of the ship. Reynolds moved to the viewport and saw streams of bright red tomato sauce making new patterns across the already stained hull. Through the transparent walls of the Council Station, he could see several officials pointing in horror. You know what, Wong? Let them watch. They might as well get used to how humans do things. On the Council Station, XL Thorne observed the new red substance appearing on the human vessels and turned to Security Chief Kraz with an expression of resigned dismay. Create another subcommittee. They sighed. The Human Containment Strategy Working Group, priority level, urgent. Kraz watched the human ship, now hosting what appeared to be an increasingly rowdy celebration. With all due respect, Counselor, I don't think the galaxy will ever be the same. No, agreed Zell Thorne, their bioluminescence forming patterns that, for the first time, suggested something like reluctant admiration. For better or worse, it most certainly will not.